Think about the last time someone had complete power over you. Not physical power, not money, not authority. Something softer, more invisible than any of those things. Maybe it was a person who walked into a room and your eyes went straight to them and you didn't know why. Maybe it was someone who said your name in a way that made everything else go quiet. Maybe it was a relationship where you knew you were losing yourself and you couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. You weren't weak. You weren't naive. You were experiencing something that has existed for as long as human beings have existed. Seduction. And I don't mean romance. I don't mean flirting. I mean the full, ancient, terrifying art of making another person want what you want them to want without them ever realizing it's happening. Robert Greene spent years studying this. He went back through thousands of years of history. Emperors, courtesans, artists, con artists, lovers, politicians, visionaries, and he mapped the pattern. He called it the Art of Seduction. And what he found will make you look at every relationship you've ever had in a completely different way. Not because it will teach you to manipulate people, but because after you understand it, you will never be unconsciously manipulated again. That's the real gift of this book. Let's begin.
Part 1. The fundamental truth Greene starts with. Greene opens with an idea that is uncomfortable to sit with. Most of us, he says, are already being seduced, right now, all the time, by advertising that makes you feel incomplete without a product, by politicians who make you feel like they understand your life, by friends who make you feel chosen, by lovers who make you feel seen, by social media engineered by behavioral psychologists designed to make you feel the exact emotions that keep you scrolling. We live inside seduction. We just don't have a name for it. Greene's argument is this: seduction is not something that happens between exceptional people in extraordinary circumstances. It is the fundamental mechanism of human influence, and refusing to understand it doesn't protect you from it. It just leaves you defenseless. The people who study it, who understand what actually moves human beings, have always had a strategic advantage over those who prefer not to look. That's what this book is. It's a map of the terrain that most of human history's most powerful, most irresistible, and most dangerous people navigated by instinct. Greene makes it conscious. He makes it visible. Before we go into the types of seducers and the tactics, there's one idea from Greene that I want you to hold through this entire video. One idea that everything else plugs into. He says, the greatest weakness of most human beings is the chronic feeling of incompleteness. We feel there is something missing in ourselves, in our lives, in the world around us. We want to feel understood. We want to feel special. We want to feel alive in a way the daily routine consistently fails to deliver. The seducer, whether they know it consciously or not, finds this emptiness and fills it. They make you feel, even temporarily, that the missing thing has been found. And that feeling is the most addictive thing on earth, more powerful than any drug, more persuasive than any argument, because it speaks to the deepest human need. Now let's meet the people who knew how to do this best. Part 2. The 9 types of seducer. Greene identifies 9 archetypal seducers throughout history. 9 patterns that appear again and again in different bodies, different centuries, different cultures, but operating on the exact same psychological mechanisms. Let me take you through each one, not as a list, as a story. The Siren. The year is 41 BC. Mark Antony, the most powerful military commander in the Western world, receives word that Queen Cleopatra of Egypt will come to meet him. He expects a diplomatic visit. He prepares a formal reception. What arrives instead is almost impossible to describe with words, which is why the historian Plutarch tried anyway. He wrote that Cleopatra sailed up the river Cydnus on a barge with purple sails that had been soaked in perfume, so that the wind itself carried her arrival before she appeared. Her maids were dressed as sea nymphs. She reclined under a golden canopy, dressed as Venus. Incense burned on both banks. Crowds abandoned the streets to watch her arrive. Antony was left sitting alone at his own reception dinner. He sent for her. She simply invited him to dine with her instead. That night changed the course of world history. The Siren, Greene writes, is the most immediately powerful of all seducer types. She, and the Siren is almost always she historically, creates a fantasy so overwhelming that the target is pulled out of their normal world. Ordinary reality cannot compete. The Siren doesn't chase. She radiates. She creates an atmosphere so charged with pleasure and beauty and the suggestion of danger that the target moves towards her as if pulled by a tide. And here's the psychological key. The Siren offers an escape from the burden of being a responsible adult. Antony was a general, a statesman, a man of crushing duty. Cleopatra made him feel like none of that mattered. She made him feel alive in a way that power and duty never could. That, Greene says, is the Siren's true weapon. Not beauty, not sex, escape.
The Rake. The Rake is the male counterpart, and Greene makes a fascinating observation here. Where society often forgives a woman who seduces, it condemns a man who does the same. The Rake, therefore, has always operated in defiance of social convention, and paradoxically, that defiance is precisely what makes him irresistible. Casanova, Don Juan, Lord Byron, who women adored despite, or because of, the fact that he was described by his former lover as mad, bad, and dangerous to know. The Rake's power is singular and specific. He makes every woman he encounters feel like she is the only one who truly matters to him. Not just in this moment, in the history of his life. His attention is absolute. His devotion, in the moment it's given, is total. And he communicates it not through words, but through action. Through the letter delivered at midnight, through the poem written about her eyes, through the look that says, "I see you in a way no one else ever has." The rational woman knows he will be the same way with the next one, but rationality is not where the Rake operates. He operates in feeling, in atmosphere, in the overwhelming present tense experience of being truly, dangerously desired. Greene notes, the Rake risks everything for pleasure. And women, who have historically been told to be careful, to be sensible, to guard themselves, find the Rake's recklessness intoxicating. He doesn't ask for permission, he pursues. And in a world that punishes desire, there is something wildly liberating about someone who refuses to apologize for wanting you.
The ideal lover. This one might be the most immediately applicable to your own life, and possibly the most interesting. The ideal lover, Greene says, is rare precisely because it requires a skill most people never develop. The ability to truly see another person, not who you want them to be, not who they present themselves as, who they actually are underneath. The dream they carry, the version of themselves they've never quite been able to live, the life they imagine when no one is watching. The ideal lover finds this, and then becomes the mirror that shows it to them. Casanova again offers the best example. He was not the most beautiful man in any room, but he had an extraordinary ability to make each woman feel that she was, in his eyes, exactly who she had always wanted to be. Not who she was, who she dreamed of being. He listened, really listened. He noticed, he reflected back. The woman who thought she was just a merchant's wife discovered in his company that she was sophisticated and worldly and worthy of great passion. The ideal lover doesn't seduce you by overwhelming you. He elevates you. And here's the dark side that Greene is honest about. The elevation is a construction. It's a projection. The ideal lover is not seeing you. He's reading your deepest longing and reflecting it back with enough skill that you can't tell the difference. But here's what Greene makes you ask. Does it matter? If the feeling is real, if for the first time in years you feel genuinely seen, does it change anything that the seeing was, to some degree, a performance? I'll leave that with you.
The dandy. The dandy confuses gender, confuses social categories, confuses your ability to place them in a box. They are neither fully masculine nor fully feminine, neither entirely available nor entirely unavailable, neither here nor there. And that in-between space creates an irresistible fascination. Oscar Wilde,
David Bowie, Marlene Dietrich in A Man's Tuxedo. They all operated in this space. The psychological mechanism is envy and desire working simultaneously. You want to be with them, and you want to be with them at the same time, and you can't always separate the two feelings. The dandy is not trying to please you. They are not adjusting themselves to your expectations. They are entirely, almost rudely themselves. And that self-possession is so rare that it reads as magnetic. Greene's observation about the dandy is precise. Most people spend their lives performing a role society assigned them. The dandy refuses. And watching someone refuse the performance you've spent your life obediently giving is simultaneously frightening and liberating. You want to be near them, like standing near someone who has already escaped the cage you're still in.
Children have a power that most adults have lost. They are authentic in a way that is almost painful to witness. Their joy is complete joy. Their sadness is complete sadness. They don't calculate. They don't perform. They simply are. The natural is an adult who has somehow retained this quality or learned to project it with extraordinary skill. Charlie Chaplin, Cary Grant, the friend everyone loves immediately without knowing why. The person who walks into a room and makes it feel more alive just by being in it. Greene says the natural's power comes from disarming our defenses. We are so accustomed to guarded, performed, strategic social interaction that someone who seems genuinely free of all that hits us like a burst of oxygen. We lower our guard immediately. We want to be near them. We want some of that freedom. The danger, Greene identifies, much of what appears to be natural is, in the most skilled practitioners, completely constructed. Charlie Chaplin spent years developing the appearance of effortlessness. It was the most disciplined performance of spontaneity in Hollywood history. But the lesson is real. Even if the naturalness is partly manufactured, the skill being developed is the removal of visible effort, the disappearance of the machinery behind the magic.
The Coquette.
The Coquette may be the most psychologically instructive seducer type in the entire book, because the Coquette's primary weapon is one that feels counterintuitive, even wrong, until you see how reliably it works: withdrawal. The Coquette gives you just enough to ignite desire and then pulls back. Not in a cold way, not in a cruel way, in a way that suggests the withdrawal might not be permanent if you just showed enough interest, said the right thing, made the right move. Napoleon Bonaparte, the conqueror of Europe, was completely mastered by his first wife, Joséphine, precisely through this mechanism. She was warm and present, and then suddenly distant, available and then unreachable, devoted in her letters and indifferent at the door. Napoleon, who could command armies of hundreds of thousands, wrote her letters of almost embarrassing desperation. "Come home. I need you. You are everything." She had engineered exactly this. The psychology is ancient and simple. We value most what we might lose. We take for granted what is always available. The Coquette creates uncertainty, and uncertainty, Greene says, is the engine of desire. Once you see this pattern, you will recognize it everywhere. In people you know, in relationships you've had, and possibly, if you're honest, in yourself.
The charmer. The charmer doesn't seduce with beauty or mystery or the withdrawal of attention. The charmer makes you feel extraordinary. They remember your name, your birthday, the small thing you mentioned 3 weeks ago that you didn't think anyone was listening to. They give you their complete, undivided, genuine-seeming attention. They make you funnier than you are by laughing in exactly the right places. They make you more intelligent by asking questions that draw out your best thinking. In their presence, you are a better version of yourself. Benjamin Disraeli, the 19th century British Prime Minister, was famous for this. A woman who had dined with both Disraeli and Gladstone once described the difference. "When I left the table after sitting next to Mr. Gladstone, I thought he was the cleverest man in England. But when I sat next to Mr. Disraeli, I left feeling that I was the cleverest woman in England." That is the charmer's gift. They subtract themselves and insert you.
The paradox? By making everything about you, they make you think about nothing but them.
The charismatic. The charismatic seduces not individuals, but groups. Not one person at a time, but movements, cultures, ages. Napoleon again, Cleopatra, John F. Kennedy, Steve Jobs, Martin Luther King Jr. The charismatic creates a feeling of destiny. Standing near them, you feel that history is being made, that you are part of something larger than your individual life, that this person has been given a special vision that lesser people cannot see. Greene is careful here, and I want you to notice that he is careful here. He does not distinguish between charismatics who used this power for good and those who used it for catastrophic harm. Napoleon and Hitler both used identical psychological mechanisms. Kennedy and Manson both made followers feel chosen. The mechanism doesn't care about morality, it just works. The lesson Greene wants you to draw is not how to become charismatic, but how to recognize it. Because the charismatic's followers consistently describe the same experience, the feeling of being seen and chosen by someone extraordinary. That feeling bypasses critical thinking. It bypasses the very machinery we use to evaluate truth. When someone makes you feel that kind of feeling, that chosen by greatness feeling, the alarm bells should be going off, not the butterflies.
The star. The final archetype is the one we understand most intuitively in the modern world because we have created entire industries around producing it. The star is not a person. The star is a projection, a screen onto which each person in the audience projects their own fantasies, their own needs, their own desires. The star is sufficiently distant, sufficiently larger than life, sufficiently unknowable that the projection is possible. Marilyn Monroe understood this intuitively. She understood that the woman on screen could be a different person to every person watching, every man's fantasy of being desired, every woman's secret desire for permission to be openly sensual. Marilyn Monroe was not a woman. She was a construct. And the construct was more powerful than any real person could have been, because a real person has specific qualities that limit the projection. The star, by being slightly out of focus, allows everyone to see what they want to see. Social media has democratized this. Every carefully curated Instagram account is, to some degree, a star project, a constructed image sufficiently blurred at the edges to allow followers to project onto it what they need. The lesson: the distance is not accidental. The star maintains it. Step too close, and the projection collapses. The magic lives in the gap between what is shown and what remains unknown.
Part 3. The seductive process. How it actually unfolds.
Understanding the archetypes is only half the picture. The other half is the process, the sequence of moves that Greene maps with extraordinary precision. And here's what makes this section of the book genuinely unsettling. Once you read it, you start to see the sequence everywhere, in stories you already know, in your own past, in what's happening around you right now. The first move is always the same. Choose the right target. Greene spends surprisingly little time on attraction and a great deal of time on selection. The great seducers, he observes, do not try to seduce everyone. They are extraordinarily precise. They look for the gap, the need, the hunger that isn't being fed. The person who is restless but doesn't know why. The person who is performing contentment but feeling something else underneath. The most seducible people, Greene says, are those who have a powerful imagination, those who are dissatisfied with their ordinary life, and those who have an idealistic streak, a belief that something more intense, more meaningful, more real is possible. Does that describe anyone you know? The second move: create mystery before they know you. The first impression is not meant to reveal, it is meant to suggest. Every great seducer enters the target's life with deliberate incompleteness. They show enough to fascinate, but withhold enough to compel investigation. They are simultaneously familiar enough to approach and strange enough to intrigue. Greene calls this appearing in dreams. The goal is to become the thing the target thinks about when they're supposed to be thinking about something else. The third move:
send mixed signals. This is where many people's moral discomfort with the book begins, and it should. Because what Greene is describing here is the deliberate engineering of emotional confusion. Warmth followed by distance, interest followed by indifference. The look that says you are everything in the evening, and the coolness at breakfast that makes the target wonder if they imagined it. The effect, the target's attention becomes consumed with resolving the contradiction. Did I do something? What does she mean? Why is he different today? The energy of their attention that otherwise would be directed at their own life, is now entirely occupied with the seducer. This is not romantic. This is architecture. It is the deliberate construction of psychological dependency through managed uncertainty. Knowing this doesn't make you immune to it, by the way. I want to be honest about that. Understanding the mechanism and being able to resist it in the moment it's being applied are very different things. The feeling bypasses the knowledge, but the knowledge helps. The fourth move, appear to be what the target needs you to be. Not who you are, who they need. This requires a quality Greene calls self-effacement, the ability to quiet your own personality and create space for the target to project onto you what they want to see. The ideal seducer, Greene says, is not the most colorful personality in the room. They are the most responsive. They read. They listen at a level beyond the surface words. They hear the longing beneath the complaint, the need beneath the performance, the dream beneath the resignation. And then they become the person who could make that longing real. This requires genuine attention. In a world of chronic distraction, this quality alone, the ability to truly focus on another person, is so rare that it reads as extraordinary. The fifth move, create need and dependency. Once trust is established, the seducer begins, gradually, almost imperceptibly, to deepen the target's need for their presence. Greene describes this as introducing a slight anxiety into what had previously been only pleasure, a suggestion that this could all disappear, a moment of distance after extended closeness, a reference to a past that doesn't include the target, a hint of other possibilities. The target, having already opened themselves to pleasure, now introduces a new element into that experience, the fear of loss. And as every psychologist knows, the fear of loss is a more powerful motivator than the prospect of gain. The final move, the physical and emotional consummation. Greene is careful to note that this final stage is not necessarily physical intimacy, though it often is. The true consummation he's describing is the moment the target fully surrenders, the moment they stop protecting themselves, the moment they are completely, vulnerably present. This moment, he notes, is both the goal and, for great seducers, often the beginning of the exit, because the seducer's power comes from desire, from the approaching rather than the arrived. Once the surrender is complete, the game changes. The most skilled seducers, Greene notes, often begin the process of withdrawal almost immediately after consummation, beginning the cycle again, ensuring the target continues to pursue rather than possess. This is where the book becomes genuinely dark. Because what Greene is describing, stripped of the elegant historical examples, is a pattern that most of us would recognize immediately as emotional abuse if we saw it clearly. And that recognition, that discomfort, is exactly what Greene intends.
Here's the part of the book that most summaries skip, and I think it's the most important part. Greene doesn't just describe seducers. He describes what he calls the anti-seducer, and the chapter is, in many ways, the moral heart of the book. The anti-seducer, Greene says, is someone who inadvertently repels, not through malice, through a specific set of behaviors that radiate need, self-absorption, and the inability to read what another person actually wants or feels. The anti-seducer moralizes. They tell you what you should feel. They complain, chronically, without catharsis. They are so anxious for validation that their hunger makes others feel trapped rather than chosen. They are, in Greene's framing, the dark mirror of everything the seducer is. But here's what I want you to sit with. The anti-seducer is usually someone in pain, someone whose neediness comes from genuine emotional wounds, someone whose difficulty reading others comes from having been failed by the people who were supposed to see them.
The seducer is often someone who learned very early that real vulnerability was dangerous, so they developed skill in place of it, technique in place of exposure, the performance of intimacy instead of the risk of the actual thing. Greene's seducers are almost without exception lonely people. Cleopatra ended her life with suicide, abandoned by Rome. Casanova spent his final years in isolation, writing his memoirs because he had no one left. Marilyn Monroe died alone. The skill at connecting, at making others feel chosen, seen, desired, did not protect them from their own need to be chosen, seen, and desired. The seducer seduces everyone except themselves. I want to be direct with you now about something. This book has been criticized, fairly, for presenting manipulation as craft, for treating other human beings as targets rather than as people, for the implicit suggestion that the goal of human connection is not mutual vulnerability, but strategic victory. Greene never quite addresses this head-on. He presents the information and leaves the ethics to the reader. So let me offer what I think he leaves out. The relationships in this book, the great seductions of history, almost never end well. They end in ruins, in exile, in insanity, in suicide, in war. The seducer's world is a world of performance, and performance, however skilled, cannot substitute for the thing it mimics forever. At some point, Antony needed Cleopatra to be real, not theatrical. At some point, Casanova's conquests stopped being victories and became evidence of an emptiness he couldn't fill. At some point, the person who was seduced discovers they were reading from a script they never agreed to perform in. The real cost of seduction, to the seducer, is the inability to stop, the compulsion to always be performing, always be strategic, always be managing the perception, never simply being present. Real intimacy, the kind that actually satisfies the need that seduction mimics, requires exactly what the seducer has learned not to do. It requires the absence of strategy. I've spent this video taking you through the most provocative book Robert Greene ever wrote. And I want to close by telling you what I think the book is actually about. It's not about becoming a seducer. Greene is too intelligent for that to be his real message. A book genuinely designed to make you manipulative would not spend as many pages as this one does on the psychology of being manipulated. It would not describe the seducer's loneliness so clearly or the cost of their strategies so honestly. What this book is actually about is awareness. It is a detailed map of a terrain that every human being inhabits, but most navigate blindly. When you finish this book, you recognize the Coquette's withdrawal for what it is, not mysterious unavailability, but a strategy, conscious or not, for generating desire through anxiety. You recognize the charmer's focused attention as a technique, and that recognition doesn't make you immune to it, but it gives you enough of a pause to ask, is this person genuinely interested in me? Or are they genuinely skilled at appearing interested in me? You recognize the charismatic's electricity as a projection, and you understand that your experience of being chosen by someone extraordinary might be less about who you are, and more about who they have learned to make people feel they are. This awareness protects you, not completely, not always, but enough to ask the question. Greene ends the book with a reflection that I find quietly devastating in the best possible way. He suggests that the truly powerful form of seduction, the one that outlasts all the others, the one that produces something real rather than something temporary, is not any of the 9 archetypes. It is self-seduction, the ability to be so genuinely engaged with your own life, so fully present in your own unfolding story, so authentically absorbed in what you are building and creating and becoming, that the fascination is real rather than performed. People who are genuinely passionate are irresistible, not because they have learned technique, but because they are radiating something that most people have lost: the fire of authentic engagement, the aliveness of someone who is not going through the motions. You can't fake this, and you don't have to. The most seductive quality a human being can possess, Greene ultimately suggests, is a life that is genuinely worth living. Not performed for an audience, not curated for consumption. Actually, privately, specifically yours. Because the deepest human longing, the longing that every seducer exploits, is the longing to be near someone who is fully alive. And you can choose to become that person, not by studying their techniques, by doing the much harder, much quieter, much more important work of figuring out what it is that actually makes your own life feel worth living, and then doing that. That, I think, is what Robert Greene actually wanted to say. Buried under all the historical examples and the seduction strategies and the maps of psychological power. That the game is real, and the game is everywhere. But the best move you can make in it is not to become a better player. It's to build a life so genuinely your own that you stop needing to play it at all.
The book is The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. It is one of the most controversial things he's written, and one of the most illuminating. Read it with your eyes open. Read it skeptically. Read the dark chapters and let yourself be uncomfortable. That discomfort is the book doing its job. And when you finish, ask yourself not how do I use this, but where have I seen this? In your past, in your present, in the mirror if you're being really honest. That question, honestly answered, is worth more than any seduction strategy ever written. If this video gave you something real today, share it with someone who's ready for it. Not everyone is, but some people are waiting for exactly this. Leave me a comment telling me which archetype you recognized most clearly, in someone you've loved or in yourself. I want to know. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next one.